The stars stretched endlessly in the black sea of space. A small transport ship moved slowly across the quiet lane that connected one colony to another. Inside the ship, the crew worked with calm hands, for they carried only supplies, food containers, medicine boxes, and spare tools. It was not a warship, not a vessel built for glory, only a lifeline between scattered settlements of humankind. Among the crew was Thomas, the ship's medic. He was not a man who sought adventure or danger. His work was simple: check the crew's health, keep track of medicine stores, and be ready for accidents. He had steady hands and a quiet voice, and many trusted him more than they trusted the machines that scanned their bodies. Thomas never rushed. He listened carefully, and he treated every wound with the same care, whether it was a small cut or a broken bone. The ship's routine was calm until a sudden alarm broke the silence. The signal came from the front console, where Mira, the navigator, was watching the sensors. Her voice shook as she called out, "There is something ahead." A signal, but not human. The crew gathered near her station. On the screen glowed a strange pattern. It was not random. It pulsed in a rhythm, sharp and urgent. It was not one of their coded signals, and it did not belong to the colonies. Something unknown was calling from the emptiness. The captain, a man named Ryan, frowned as he studied the screen. He was cautious but not fearful. "Bring us closer," he ordered. "If it is a distress call, we cannot ignore it." The engines hummed louder, and the ship slowly changed course. As the black curtain of space parted, a massive shape appeared before them. At first, it looked like a broken mountain floating in the void. But as they drew nearer, the crew saw the truth. It was a vessel, larger than any human design, shaped with sweeping curves that looked like wings stretched across the stars. But the ship was wounded. Fire burned in broken sections. Parts of its frame hung loose, and lights flickered weakly across its body. The crew gasped. None had seen such a vessel before. Its size alone spoke of a civilization far beyond their colonies. Yet it was silent except for the signal that had dragged them here. "Life signs?" Captain Ryan asked. Mira's fingers ran across the panel. She looked up slowly. "Yes, many. Faint but present." The captain hesitated. To approach an unknown alien vessel was dangerous, but to leave survivors behind was unthinkable. His eyes moved across his crew, resting finally on Thomas. "Prepare yourself, medic. If there are wounded, they will need help." Thomas gave a small nod. His heart beat faster, yet his hands did not shake. He gathered his bag of supplies, checking each tool as the transport ship moved closer to the alien giant. When they found a docking point, the human crew crossed into the vast halls of the alien ship. The air was heavy with smoke, and the lights were dim. The walls curved upward like the inside of a cathedral, high and endless, but now cracked and scarred from the damage. Strange symbols glowed weakly on the walls, and the floor was littered with fragments of metal. The crew walked slowly, weapons ready, though they hoped not to use them. The silence was broken by distant sounds, echoes of movement, faint cries, the groan of metal under strain. Then they saw them. Figures moved in the shadows ahead, tall and graceful, though weary. Their skin was pale, their eyes large and sharp. From their backs stretched wings, real wings, feathered and wide, though many were torn and stained. They were unlike any creature humans had ever seen, yet there was no mistaking the pain in their steps. At the front of this group was a woman taller than the rest. Her wings dragged slightly behind her, one bent in a way that made Thomas's chest tighten. Each step she took seemed harder than the last. When the aliens noticed the humans, weapons rose at once. Long staffs of light hummed as the guards aimed them forward. The human crew froze, hands near their belts but unwilling to draw first. For a tense moment, no one spoke. No one moved. Only the smoke drifted between them. The tall woman at the front tried to lift her head. Her face was strong but pale from strain. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Instead, her legs gave way beneath her. She collapsed, her bent wings striking the floor with a dull thud. The sound broke the standoff. The alien guards shouted. They pointed their weapons directly at the humans, their voices sharp with warning. But before the captain could give an order, Thomas stepped forward. He moved quickly, yet not with aggression. His medical bag swung at his side as he knelt near the fallen woman. His hands hovered over her wing, careful, respectful, but filled with purpose. The alien guards shouted louder. One raised his weapon, ready to strike, but the woman on the floor weakly raised her hand. Her voice was faint, but her gesture was clear. She did not want them to fire. Thomas opened his bag. He pulled out clean bandages and a small light to inspect the injury. The wing was torn deeply, feathers broken and flesh exposed. He did not know alien anatomy, but pain was universal and so was bleeding. He worked with calm hands, cleaning the wound, pressing gently to stop the flow, then wrapping the wing with layer after layer of white cloth. His voice was low as he spoke to her, though he knew she could not understand. "You are safe. Hold still. This will help." The alien woman's eyes half closed, yet she watched him as he worked. Her breath came slow and heavy, but her body eased under his touch. The guards lowered their weapons slightly, confusion spreading among them. They had expected harm, yet the human did nothing but heal. Behind Thomas, the human crew stood ready, uncertain but trusting their medic's quiet courage. No one dared disturb the fragile balance forming in the smoky hall. When Thomas finished, he tied the last strip of cloth with gentle hands. The wing was still bent, but now it was held firm, supported enough to prevent worse damage. He sat back slightly, meeting the woman's gaze. Her lips moved as if to speak, but no sound came. Instead, she raised her hand slowly, touching the bandage with care. Her eyes did not leave his face. Something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, recognition, or perhaps the simple truth that kindness needed no common language. The hall remained silent. Alien guards stared at the human medic. Human crew members waited with held breath. In that silence, the smoke still rose, the ship still groaned, and the stars outside still burned. Yet within the ruined alien vessel, something small and new had taken shape, an act of trust where none had existed before. And though neither side fully understood it yet, the path of both their peoples had just begun to change. The great alien vessel remained quiet except for the low hum of damaged engines and the occasional crack of failing metal. Smoke lingered in the halls, curling around the broken walls like thin clouds. The human crew stood close together, their hands near their belts but their weapons still holstered. They did not want to fight. They only waited for what would come next. Thomas stayed kneeling beside the fallen alien woman. The white cloth of his bandage was wrapped around her bent wing. It was firm but gentle, holding the bones and torn flesh together in a way that brought at least some relief. Her pale face had regained a little color. Her breathing was slow, uneven, but no longer as shallow as when she first collapsed. The guards around her still looked uncertain. They held their glowing staffs pointed loosely toward the humans. Their eyes shifted between the medic and their commander. The one Thomas had treated was clearly important. Her presence, even in weakness, carried authority. And now her authority had extended to the human who had dared to touch her wing. The alien woman tried to push herself upright. The effort was slow and painful. Thomas reached out, steadying her shoulder without thinking. She leaned against his arm, not with fear but with trust. Her gaze met his, calm yet full of quiet strength. She made a sound, a short word in her own language. None of the humans understood it, but her guards reacted at once. They lowered their weapons fully. The sudden change brought a long silence. The humans shifted on their feet, exchanging unsure glances. Captain Rian stepped forward carefully. His voice was steady, though his mind raced. "We mean no harm. We came because of the signal. We only want to help." Of course, the words were lost to the aliens, yet something in his tone seemed to carry across the language barrier. The alien woman looked at him briefly before returning her gaze to Thomas. She placed her hand slowly over the bandage on her wing. Her fingers pressed the cloth, and then she touched her chest as if to say, "This matters." Thomas watched her, uncertain, yet he understood in his own way. Healing was its own language. The medic glanced at the wound again. The wing was large and heavy, built for flight through air, not space. It reminded him of birds back on Earth, though on a far grander scale. Feathers, though many were torn, still gleamed faintly in the dim light. Beneath the feathers, muscle and bone had suffered. He did not know how these creatures flew, nor if they needed wings only for movement or also for honor. But one thing he knew well: without care, the wound would grow worse. Thomas looked up at the captain. "She needs more help than I can give here. We should bring her to our ship." The captain hesitated. He knew the risk. To move their leader might spark anger, yet to leave her in the broken halls was dangerous too. He looked at the alien guards. Their sharp eyes followed every human movement, but when their commander weakly lifted her hand again, they stepped aside. The path was clear. Together, the humans and aliens helped lift the injured woman. Her wings were heavy and it took care not to bend them further. Thomas guided the motion with steady instructions, pointing and gesturing where to hold. The guards followed his lead, though their eyes still glowed with suspicion. Step by step they carried her toward the docking point. The journey was slow. The hall stretched long and cracked. Sparks fell from the ceiling like small stars. The groans of the wounded ship echoed around them, making every step feel fragile. Yet through it all, the alien woman did not cry out. Her jaw remained tight, her eyes focused forward. Only when Thomas adjusted the bandage did she close her eyes for a brief moment, letting out a slow breath. At last they reached the human transport. The difference between the two ships was striking. The alien vessel was vast and built with curves like wings. The human ship was plain, made of straight lines and steel walls. But in that moment, the plain vessel became a place of safety. Inside, Thomas directed the crew to clear the medical room. Supplies were pushed aside, the table prepared. The alien woman was laid gently upon it, her wings spread as best as space allowed. The guards crowded the door, their tall forms filling the frame, their staffs glowing faintly. They did not enter, but they watched every motion. Tomas washed his hands quickly, then opened his bag. He worked carefully, examining the wound again. The bandage had slowed the bleeding, but the torn flesh needed deeper care. He did not know alien medicine, but he trusted the basics. Clean the wound. Stop the bleeding. Support the bones. Protect against infection. He spoke softly as he worked, though she could not understand. This will hurt, but it will help. Stay strong. The alien woman's eyes met his. She gave a small nod, as if she understood more than he expected. Tomas cleaned the wound with careful strokes using clear liquid from his pack. The feathers around the tear were sticky with blood. He removed the broken ones gently, laying them aside. The woman flinched but did not resist. When he pressed a tool against the deeper part of the wound, her hand clenched around the edge of the table. A low sound escaped her throat. Not quite a cry, but something close. The guards at the door tensed, but when she raised her hand weakly toward them, they froze again. Her trust in Thomas was clear, and it bound the others in place. The medic worked slowly, layer by layer, until the wound was clean. He added stronger bandages, wrapping the wing in firm layers. He supported the bent bone with splints taken from human supplies. He checked her breathing and heart with his tools, listening to the strange rhythm of an alien life. Finally, he stepped back, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. "She will live," he said quietly. The captain let out a breath he had been holding. The human crew relaxed slightly, though their eyes still flicked toward the guards. The aliens, for their part, stood silent. They seemed unsure how to respond. The woman on the table opened her eyes again. She lifted her hand slowly, touching the bandage once more. Then she reached outward toward Thomas. He hesitated before placing his hand gently in hers. Her grip was weak but firm with meaning. The room was quiet, yet the silence was no longer heavy with fear. It was filled with something new, understanding. The captain looked around at both crews. "We cannot stay here long. Their ship is failing. We should move them to safety." Mira checked the console nearby. "Life signs remain across the alien vessel. Many are wounded. If we leave now, they may not survive." The crew exchanged glances. To rescue so many was beyond the strength of one transport ship. But to abandon them was against every principle they carried. Before a decision could be made, the alien woman spoke again. Her words were soft, but she repeated them, her eyes fixed on Thomas. He could not understand the language, yet he felt the weight of her voice. She pointed toward the corridor, then to her wing, then to her soldiers. Thomas thought carefully. Perhaps she was asking him to help the others. He turned to the captain. "I think she wants us to treat her people too." The captain rubbed his jaw. "We will do what we can, but if another ship arrives, we may not have time." Tomas looked at the alien woman again. Her pale eyes were sharp despite her weakness. There was strength in them, the kind that refused to let her people be abandoned. He nodded slowly. "Then we must move quickly." And so the work began. Humans and aliens moved together through the broken halls of the vast vessel. Thomas carried his bag from one wounded figure to another. Some had burned, some had broken wings, others could barely breathe. He treated them as best he could with the little he had. His hands grew tired, his eyes heavy, but he did not stop. At first, the alien soldiers kept their distance, watching every step. But as they saw their medic tending not only their leader but also their wounded, their stance softened. weapons lowered. Eyes no longer burned with suspicion. Some even offered their own hands to steady the injured as Tomas wrapped bandages or pressed splints into place. Hour by hour, a fragile bond grew. Not through speeches or promises, but through the simple act of one human tending wounds no machine could mend. By the time Tomas returned to check on the alien woman again, the air in the human ship felt changed. The guards no longer stood stiffly at the door. They had taken seats nearby, their wings folded carefully, their eyes calm. The woman herself was resting, her breathing steady, her body stronger. She looked at Thomas and gave a small nod of approval. Her hand rested on the bandage, a quiet reminder of the bond they now shared. The crew could not yet know what would follow. They did not know of the danger still waiting in the shadows of space. But for that moment, they understood one thing clearly. The wound had been more than flesh. It had been a barrier between peoples, and in healing it, the human medic had opened a path no one had walked before. The human transport ship floated in the shadow of the great alien vessel. Lights from both ships flickered against the dark sky, one small and sturdy, the other vast and broken. Inside the transport, the air carried the smell of medicine and the quiet hum of machines. The crew moved carefully, balancing between their duty to their own ship and the strange responsibility that had suddenly fallen upon them. At the center of this fragile calm was Thomas, the medic. His hands were tired from hours of work, yet he refused to rest. He moved between patients, both human and alien, with the same steady care. The alien soldiers no longer stopped him. They watched him with guarded eyes, but no longer with the suspicion they once carried. Some even stepped forward to help, following his gestures when he needed support. The alien woman, their leader, remained in the medical room. Her injured wing was wrapped carefully with cloth and splints. Her breathing had grown stronger, her color less pale. She rested, but her eyes often stayed open, following Thomas whenever he passed through the room. Though they had no common words, something in her gaze spoke clearly. She understood his role and she trusted him. Thomas felt the weight of her eyes often. It was not the same as the trust of his crew who knew him well. This was deeper, harder to explain. She was not only a patient, she was a bridge between two worlds that had never touched before. Every time she looked at him, he felt that his actions carried more than just life and death. They carried the chance for peace. The ship's captain, Ryan, stood near the door of the medical room one evening. He watched quietly as Thomas adjusted the bandage again. The alien woman winced, then let out a slow breath, her hand gripping the side of the bed. When Tomas finished, she touched his wrist softly, then released it. "You've built something here," Ryan said quietly once Tomas stepped away. Tomas looked back at him, frowning slightly. "I've only done what I always do. I treat the wounded." The captain shook his head. "You've done more. They look at you differently now. Not like an enemy, not even like a stranger. More like an ally." Thomas did not answer at once. He glanced at the guards by the door. Their weapons were lowered, their faces calmer. He thought of how they had carried their wounded together, how their hands had worked side by side with his. He thought of the nod the alien woman gave him each time he finished his work. "Maybe it is not about what I've done," he said finally. "Maybe it is about what they needed. Someone to show them care when everything else was breaking." The captain gave a small smile. "That is why they salute you with their eyes, Thomas, though you may not see it." The word stayed with the medic long after the captain left. The following day, the bond grew stronger. Thomas prepared to check on another wounded alien soldier who had a torn shoulder. The guard hesitated before stepping forward. For a moment, Thomas thought the soldier would push him away. Instead, the tall alien bent slightly, lowering himself so the medic could reach the wound more easily. Thomas worked carefully, wrapping the shoulder, and when he finished, the soldier placed his fist against his chest in a gesture of thanks. Thomas did not know the meaning, but he nodded in return. The alien woman watched this from her bed. Her lips curved faintly, not quite a smile, but something close. She spoke softly to the soldier in her own language, and he bowed before leaving the room. Thomas could not understand the words, but he understood the effect. She was reminding her people that trust in the human was no weakness. Mira, the navigator, whispered to Thomas later, "Do you realize she listens to you more than to anyone else? Even her soldiers obey when she signals them to follow your lead." Thomas shook his head. "I am only helping them survive. That is all," but Mira smiled knowingly. "Sometimes that is enough to lead." Later, as Thomas checked the bandages on her wing again, the alien woman moved her hand slowly toward his bag of tools. She pointed at one small vial filled with liquid. Her eyes asked a question he did not understand. Thomas picked it up, showing it carefully. "This is for pain. It will help, but I do not know how it will affect you." She studied the vial, then shook her head gently, refusing it. She tapped the bandage instead and looked into his eyes. Her message was clear. The pain was not the enemy, the weakness was. She would endure it rather than risk her strength. Thomas respected her choice. "You are strong," he said softly. "Stronger than most I have met." Though she did not know his words, she seemed to hear the tone. Her eyes softened for a moment before she looked away. As hours passed, Thomas began to notice small things. The alien woman always kept her gaze moving even when weak. She noted each soldier that entered the room, each human that passed by. She was more than a patient. She was a commander. Her silence was not only from pain, it was also the silence of one who measured every choice. One evening, while Thomas checked the supplies, she raised her hand toward him. Her voice was soft but clear. She spoke a single word, "Thomas." The medic froze. He turned toward her, eyes wide. She had spoken his name. Somehow, through the sounds around her, she had learned it. He stepped closer. "Yes, Thomas." He touched his chest. "That is me." Her lips moved again, repeating the name with slight struggle but firm intent. Then she placed her hand against her chest. She spoke another word, slow and heavy. It was her name. Thomas tried to repeat it. His tongue stumbled over the strange sound, but she nodded, satisfied. A bridge had been crossed. From that moment, their bond grew more personal. Though they shared no common language, they used small gestures, pointing, nodding, touching objects, and speaking names. Thomas showed her the tools in his bag, naming each one slowly. She repeated the sounds, storing them in memory. In return, she touched parts of her wing, her armor, her weapon, and spoke the words of her own people. He tried to echo them, clumsy but determined. The alien guards watched in silence. Some looked confused, others thoughtful, but none stopped them. They too were learning something new, that two different worlds could meet not through war but through simple effort to understand. The bond did not stay in the medical room. It spread slowly through the ship. Human crew members shared food with alien soldiers. They pointed, laughed quietly, and tried to mimic each other's words. The aliens were cautious but curious. They accepted water, tools, and even sat together in the mess hall once, their wings folded carefully against the small chairs. Captain Ryan watched it all with a thoughtful eye. "This was never in our orders," he said to Mira one evening. "We are explorers, not diplomats. Yet somehow, without a single treaty, our medic has begun something that could change everything." Mira smiled. "Sometimes history begins with a bandage, not a battle." The alien woman's strength continued to grow. She could sit upright now, though her wing remained bound. She began to walk short distances in the room, Thomas always nearby to steady her. Each step was slow, but her pride would not let her stop. She moved like a commander reclaiming her place, not a patient trapped by weakness. One evening, as she walked along the small room, she paused near the window where the stars burned bright outside. She looked at Thomas and then at the endless black beyond. She raised her hand and spoke a single word, one that carried weight. Thomas tilted his head. "What is it?" She repeated the word, then pointed outward again. Her eyes darkened, filled with memory. He realized she was speaking of enemies, the ones who had struck her fleet, the ones who had left her vessel broken. Though he did not know the name, he understood the meaning. Danger still waited beyond. Thomas touched his chest, then raised his hand in a simple gesture of promise. "We will stand with you." She watched him for a long moment, then nodded once. The bond between medic and commander had become more than survival. It was now a thread of trust between two peoples. The crew felt it. The alien soldiers felt it. Even the stars outside seemed to witness it. Neither side knew what the next day would bring, but both knew this truth. The wound had brought them together, and the bond they built from it was stronger than fear. And in the silence of space, where enemies still lurked unseen, that bond was the only shield they had. The human transport ship floated beside the great alien vessel like a child standing next to a wounded giant. Both ships carried scars, but the alien ship bore wounds so deep that its survival seemed almost impossible. Whole sections of its hull were open to space, and broken pieces drifted around it like silent graves. Inside the human ship, the crew had grown used to the presence of their strange guests. Alien soldiers sat quietly in corners, their wings folded close, their sharp eyes watching every detail. The humans had shared food and water with them, and though no true conversation was possible, the silence between them was no longer tense. It was the silence of people learning to trust without words. Thomas remained at the heart of it all. His constant work with the injured had built a bridge no translator could. Each time he walked the corridors, aliens stepped aside, their heads lowered slightly in respect. The woman commander, whose wing he had saved, had begun to move more freely. Though still weak, she carried herself with strength, her eyes steady, her posture proud. Yet peace is fragile, especially in the endless dark of space. It began with the sound of alarms. The human crew rushed to the consoles, their hearts pounding. Red lights flashed along the walls, and the engines hummed louder as the ship's systems scanned the area. Mira, the navigator, bent over her screen, her voice sharp. Another ship approaching, not one of ours. The captain's face grew hard. Show it. On the screen, a shape appeared out of the darkness. Sleek, sharp, and built for war, it closed in with terrifying speed. It carried no friendly signal, only the cold silence of an enemy. The alien soldiers in the corridors reacted at once. Their wings flared and their staffs of light snapped alive with a low hum. They knew the shape of the ship too well. Their enemy had come. The alien woman in the medical room lifted her head when the alarm sounded. She spoke quickly to her guards, her voice filled with command. Though Thomas did not understand the words, he understood the tone. The time for rest was over. War had found them. Captain Ryan called his crew together. We cannot fight them directly. Our ship is not made for battle. But we will not abandon the wounded, and we will not leave our allies to die. The human crew stood firm, though fear pressed against their chests. They had signed on for supply runs, not battles with unknown enemies. Yet none spoke of retreat. The alien woman entered the control room then, leaning slightly on one of her guards but standing tall. Her bound wing dragged behind her, but her eyes burned with fire. She looked at the human captain, then at Thomas, who had followed her. She pointed to the screen where the enemy ship drew closer. Then she placed her hand over her chest and spoke a single word that Thomas had learned. Together. The meaning needed no translation. The enemy ship fired first. Bright bolts of energy cut through the dark, slamming into the side of the wounded alien vessel. Metal shattered. Debris scattered across space. The alien soldiers cried out in their own tongue, their voices filled with fury. Inside the human ship, the walls shook as fragments struck them. Sparks flew from the consoles, but the systems held. Mira shouted over the noise. Shields are thin. We cannot take many hits. Rian's voice was calm but strong. Then we will move. Prepare evasive maneuvers. The small transport twisted and turned, darting through the debris with surprising grace. But it was not built to fight. Every bolt from the enemy pushed it closer to destruction. Then the alien woman stepped forward. She pointed at the console, her voice urgent. She spoke quickly to her guards, who rushed to her side. With gestures and short words, she directed them to share their knowledge of enemy patterns. Mira listened, her fingers flying across the controls. Bit by bit, they built a rhythm. Alien strategy joined with human skill. The ship dodged the next volley more cleanly. The alien soldiers let out sharp cries of approval. Still, defense alone would not win. They needed a plan. Thomas moved through the chaos, checking the wounded, steadying those who fell as the ship shook. He felt the fear pressing close, but he also felt something else, the strange weight of the alien woman's trust. She looked at him now, her eyes fierce, as if asking him to stand not only as a medic, but as something more. Thomas had no weapon, no command rank, but he had eyes and he had courage. He studied the screen, the way the enemy ship circled, the way it targeted the weakest points. He noticed something. They aim for the larger ship, not us, he said quickly. They want to finish what they started. If we stay near the wounded vessel, we draw their fire. If we move away, they will focus on it again. The captain heard him and nodded. Then we shield them. We are small, but we can be fast. We will make them chase us. The alien woman listened, her gaze fixed on Tomas. She spoke a word in her language, firm and clear. Then she touched her chest, then pointed to him. Her guards echoed the word as if repeating a title. Thomas did not know what it meant, but he felt the weight of it. She had placed her trust in him not just as a healer but as a leader in this moment. The battle grew fierce. The human ship darted between debris, weaving like a small bird before a hawk. The enemy followed, firing again and again but never striking the final blow. Each shot missed by narrow margins, guided by Mira's skill and the alien knowledge of enemy movements. Meanwhile, alien soldiers and human crew worked together to strengthen the failing shields. Tools were passed from hand to hand, wires connected, panels replaced. For the first time, two species that had never met before worked as one against a common foe. Through it all, Thomas moved among them, steadying hands, guiding eyes, calming voices. He was no pilot, no engineer, but he gave what they needed most, hope. His presence reminded them that survival was possible, that they were not alone. The alien woman stood beside the captain, her bound wing dragging but her spirit unbroken. She watched every move, giving signals to her soldiers, sharing her strength with those who faltered. Yet her eyes often returned to Thomas. She seemed to draw her own strength from him, as though his quiet courage gave her reason to keep standing. At last, an opportunity came. The enemy ship circled too close to the broken alien vessel, confident of its kill, but the wounded giant still had power left in its heart. The alien woman gave a sharp command and her soldiers raced to the consoles. With human help, they rerouted power to one last weapon system hidden deep in the massive hull. The alien vessel fired. A single beam of light, bright as a star, tore across the void. It struck the enemy ship on its side, breaking through armor. Flames burst outward, scattering metal into the black. The enemy reeled, its course broken. The human ship seized the moment, darting forward to push it farther from the wounded giant. Together, the two vessels turned the tide. The enemy ship, damaged and burning, drifted into the distance. It fired a few last desperate shots, but they missed. Then, with engines failing, it retreated into the shadows of space. Silence fell across the human transport. The alarms slowed. The shaking ceased. The stars outside shone bright once more. The crew let out breaths they had been holding. Some sank into their seats, their hands trembling. Others smiled weakly at one another, relief flooding their faces. The alien soldiers did not cheer. They stood tall, their wings spread slightly, their faces solemn. But in their eyes was respect. They had faced death and survived, and they knew who had stood beside them. The alien woman looked around the control room. Her gaze passed over the captain, Mira, the crew, and finally settled on Thomas. She stepped toward him slowly. Her hand, still pale from weakness, lifted and pressed lightly against his chest. She spoke a single word, soft but filled with meaning. Though he could not understand the language, Thomas felt the weight of it. She was giving him honor. The soldiers behind her raised their fists to their chests in unison. The sound of their voices filled the room, echoing in a chant. The humans did not know the words, but they felt the unity in them. For the first time, humans and aliens stood not as strangers, not even as allies, but as something more. They had fought together, bled together, and turned the tide of battle as one. The captain placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder. "You see what you've done? It is not just medicine. It is trust, it is bond, and it has changed everything." Thomas looked at the alien woman, at the soldiers saluting him. He felt the weight of their eyes, the strength of their voices. He had never sought glory, only to heal. Yet in healing he had found something greater, a place where humans and aliens could stand together. And though the battle had ended, he knew this was only the beginning. The battle was over, but the silence that followed carried a heavy weight. The human ship drifted near the broken alien vessel, its engines humming softly. Debris floated around them like ghosts of the fight that had just passed. Inside, both humans and aliens moved slowly, their bodies weary but their spirits unbroken. Thomas sat at the edge of the medical bay, wiping his hands with a cloth. Around him, wounded soldiers, both human and alien, rested on simple beds. Some were breathing softly, some whispered in their own tongues, but all were alive. He had done what he always did. He had healed where he could, comforted where he could not, and given hope where hope was fading. The alien woman commander lay on one of the stronger beds, her wing wrapped carefully as before. She no longer looked as pale. Her eyes held the fire of command once again. When she saw Thomas checking another soldier's bandages, she lifted her hand. One of her guards called softly to him and pointed. Thomas walked to her side. She studied him for a moment, her sharp eyes calm now, Then she spoke a word he did not know, but her hand pressed gently against her chest. He understood it as gratitude. He smiled and bowed his head slightly. In the control room, Captain Ryan stood with his officers. Mira showed him the scans. The enemy ship is gone. It took heavy damage and retreated. We are safe for now. The captain nodded, but his face was serious. Safe is not enough. We need to find a way to guide their fleet home. Their vessel is broken and our ship cannot carry all of them. One of the alien guards stepped forward, bowing slightly. He spoke in a low voice, then tapped his arm console. A holographic map flickered to life above the table. It showed stars, paths, and a glowing point far away. The alien woman had given instructions through her soldiers. That glowing point was their fleet. Mira studied it carefully. It is not close. At our current speed, it will take days. But we can make it. The captain looked at the alien soldiers. We will take you to your fleet. It is the least we can do. The guard repeated the word together in a rough human accent. That was enough for everyone to understand. The next hours were filled with quiet work. Humans and aliens shared duties. Together, they cleared debris from corridors, secured broken panels, and patched cracks in the walls. When water containers grew low, both sides rationed equally. When food was shared, no one took more than another. It was strange and yet natural. What began with mistrust had grown into something stronger. Every time Tomas walked past, he saw alien soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder with human crew, lifting beams, tightening bolts, or helping the wounded. Their eyes no longer looked sharp with suspicion. Instead, they carried the calm strength of companions. Thomas himself had little time to rest. Wounded soldiers called for him, both alien and human. He answered every call. With simple cloth, water, and steady hands, he eased pain and mended wounds. His smile never wavered, even when his body begged him to sleep. The alien woman often watched him. Sometimes she gave quiet instructions to her guards, who then brought Thomas water or food. She seemed to understand that his strength came not from weapons but from his endless care for others. 3 days passed as the ship made its slow journey. The stars outside shifted, and the map showed they were drawing closer to the alien fleet. On the third evening, the crew gathered in the main corridor to share a rare moment of quiet. Food had been divided, and though the portions were small, no one complained. The alien soldiers sat among the humans, their wings folded, their long fingers holding cups of water. The scene was almost peaceful. Thomas sat near the alien woman. She had begun to walk short distances again, her steps steadier each day. Her wing remained bound, but her spirit had returned. When he handed her a piece of bread, she accepted it with both hands and bowed her head slightly. For a long while, no one spoke. The silence was not empty. It was full of respect. The next morning, alarms sounded again, but this time they carried no fear. Mira shouted from the control room, her voice bright. "We found them. The fleet is near." Everyone rushed to the screens. There, shining against the darkness, was a sight that filled hearts with relief. Dozens of massive alien ships floated in formation. Their wings of metal stretched wide like guardians of the stars. The alien soldiers in the human ship cried out with joy. Their voices were loud and sharp, filled with emotion. The alien woman placed her hand on her chest, her eyes shining. For the first time since she had been rescued, she smiled. The captain gave orders quickly. "Signal them. Tell them we bring their commander home." As the human transport moved closer, the alien fleet opened a path. Their ships turned slightly, creating a corridor of honor. Lights flashed along their hulls, not as weapons but as signals of welcome. The human crew watched in awe. Never before had they seen such a display. The alien soldiers stood taller, their pride returning. Yet their eyes kept turning toward Thomas. They knew who had made this moment possible. The transport docked with one of the largest alien vessels. As the doors opened, rows of alien warriors stood waiting, their staffs of light glowing softly. Their eyes locked onto the woman commander as she stepped out, supported by Tomas and one of her guards. The warriors dropped to one knee, their heads bowed. A low sound filled the air like thunder rolling softly. It was their salute. The commander paused at the doorway. She looked at her people, then at Tomas. Slowly, she stepped aside, motioning him forward. Confused, Tomas shook his head, but she placed her hand firmly on his back, guiding him ahead. Her guards moved aside, leaving him in clear view of the waiting warriors. Silence fell. Every alien eye turned to the human medic. Then as one, the rows of warriors struck their fists against their chests. The sound echoed through the great hall. Their salute was not for their commander alone. It was for him. Thomas froze. His heart pounded. He had never imagined such a thing. He was just a medic, a simple man with bandages and steady hands. Yet here he stood, honored by an entire fleet. The commander spoke loudly in her language. Though Thomas could not understand the words, her tone was clear. She was telling her people what he had done, how he had saved her wing, saved their wounded, and stood beside them in battle. Her voice carried strength, but when she looked at him, her eyes softened. The warriors raised their staffs in unison, their glowing tips forming a crown of light above him. It was their highest sign of respect. The human crew watched from the doorway, stunned. Captain Rian whispered, "I think they just made him a legend." Mira smiled. "Not a soldier. Not a fighter. A healer." The alien woman stepped beside Thomas, then lifting his hand and raising it high. The warriors cheered in their own tongue, their voices shaking the walls. Thomas felt his throat tighten. He had never asked for honor, never dreamed of it. All he had ever wanted was to help. But in helping, he had built something greater than victory. He had built trust between two worlds. That evening, the aliens prepared a hall for their human guests. Food unlike anything the humans had seen was placed on long tables, bright fruits, glowing liquids, and warm breads. Music filled the air, played on instruments that shimmered with light. The humans were treated not as outsiders, but as honored guests. The alien commander sat at the head of the hall, her wings still bound but her eyes full of pride. Thomas sat at her right hand, the place of highest respect. Around them, laughter and voices mixed, human and alien together. At one point, the commander leaned close and whispered a single word in broken human speech. "Brother." Thomas looked at her, surprised, then smiled. He understood. She was not just thanking him. She was accepting him, and through him all humans as family. When it was time for the human crew to leave, the alien fleet escorted their small ship through the stars. Lights flashed across the great vessels like guardians bidding farewell. The alien woman stood at the docking bay, her soldiers around her. As Thomas prepared to step onto his transport, she caught his hand. For a moment, neither spoke. She pressed her hand against her chest, then gently against his. Her guards lifted their staffs high. The fleet outside responded with a wave of light, ships glowing one after another like a chain of stars. It was their final salute. Thomas stepped back into the human ship. The doors closed slowly. As their vessel pulled away, he looked through the window at the countless ships shining in the distance. He felt no pride, only a quiet peace. He was a healer. That was enough. And yet, because he had chosen to heal not just wounds but hearts, two species had found a bridge between them. In the endless dark of space, light had been born,